Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. All right, ready to dive into some serious dissection.
Let's do it.
Today, we're going deep with the perfect lie, the 13 tricks of top liars, and how to see through them.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
It's by Jack Nasher, and it's not about, how to become a master liar yourself.
Right.
It's more about how to spot those who've already kind of perfected the art of lying.
Like the really good liars,
Yeah,
the ones you'd never suspect.
Yeah, we're going way beyond liar, liar, pants on fire,
Right, like fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. Nasher says those are like amateur moves.
Totally. So before we get into all the crazy techniques in the book,
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about this idea of a baseline.
Yeah, the baseline is crucial.
So in terms of spotting a liar, what exactly is a baseline?
Okay, so think of it like this.
Okay.
You know how your best friend acts when they're just relaxed and being themselves?
Yeah, totally.
That's their baseline. But if they suddenly start acting really different, maybe they get super stiff or start talking a mile a minute,
Oh, I see.
it could be a sign they're trying to control how they come across, maybe because they're hiding something.
So it's not just about looking for specific behaviors, but looking for changes in how someone usually acts.
Exactly. It's like having a reference point
Right.
to compare their behavior to when things start to feel a little off.
Okay, that makes total sense. So let's jump into some of these perfect lie techniques, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
This first one, baseline copying, sounds straight out of a spy movie.
Right. Imagine a liar who meticulously studies their own truthful behavior.
Like they're watching tapes of themselves or something.
Basically, and then they replicate it perfectly when they lie.
Wow.
So they're essentially creating this performance based on their genuine reactions.
That's so sneaky.
The book mentions Aldrich Ames, the KGB CIA double agent.
No way.
Yeah, he used this technique to pass lie detector tests for years.
Wait, so he was mimicking his own truthful reactions to fool the polygraph?
Exactly.
But how does that even work?
Well, polygraphs measure, physiological stuff like stress or anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And when you genuinely believe what you're saying, your body doesn't freak out.
So if a liar can perfectly mimic how they act when they're telling the truth.
The polygraph basically can't tell the difference.
Oh, wow.
They're basically hacking the system.
So it's like they're becoming their own truthful baseline.
Exactly. It's super manipulative.
That's terrifying. Is there any way to, crack that kind of deception?
Well, it might work for a little while, but cracks can start to show under pressure.
If you keep questioning them.
Yeah. Imagine a poker player with a perfect poker face, but for hours and hours.
Eventually they'd slip up.
Exactly. So the key is to kind of disrupt their carefully constructed act.
So we need to make them sweat a little.
You could say that.
But without being, super obvious about it.
Right, you don't want to tip them off.
So how do we do that?
You could, subtly challenge their story
Hmm.
or introduce new information that contradicts what they're saying.
Oh, interesting.
Or even just, stay silent and watch their reaction.
Okay, so it's all about creating this sense of unease that throws them off balance.
Exactly. It's about disrupting that carefully constructed facade.
Got it. Let's move on to the next technique. No emotions.
This one's interesting.
You'd think guilt would be a liar's biggest giveaway.
Right. You'd assume they'd be freaking out inside.
But Nasher says the best liars don't feel guilty at all.
They've already convinced themselves they're doing the right thing.
That's kind of messed up.
It is, right? Imagine a con artist who genuinely believes their scheme is helping people.
Or, if you're applying for a job and you stretch the truth on your resume.
Yeah, and you convince yourself you totally deserve the job based on your potential.
So it's not that they don't have emotions, it's that they've, reframe the situation to avoid feeling bad.
Exactly. It's a mental loophole they create.
But if they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, how do we even approach that?
You have to raise the stakes.
Up the ante.
Yeah, emphasize the trust that's being broken.
So remind them of the potential consequences of their actions.
Exactly. You might be able to trigger those hidden feelings of guilt or anxiety.
Even if they've buried them deep down.
Right, because even if they think they're justified, there might still be a flicker of doubt.
Okay, I see what you mean. This next technique is where things get really weird.
Self-belief, right.
Yeah, Nasher says some liars actually start believing their own lie.
I know, right? It sounds crazy.
But I guess it could be used for, good or bad.
think about magicians.
Okay.
A magician who truly believes in their illusions is way more convincing.
The one who's just going through the motions.
Exactly. Same goes for, like, a salesperson who truly believes in their product.
So the line between lying and believing can get really blurry.
Absolutely. It's a really tough one to deal with.
So how do you even, like, counter that? If they believe their own lie, wouldn't normal lie detecting stuff be useless?
Well, there's this technique called reality monitoring.
Okay, what's that?
It's about analyzing the details and consistency of their story.
Like looking for plot holes.
Kinda. Real memories usually have lots of specific details and make sense internally.
Hmm.
But made-up stories, even if the liar believes them, might be missing those things.
So we should pay close attention to the content of what they're saying.
Yeah, like, does it feel too rehearsed or lacking in, those spontaneous details real memories have?
This is blowing my mind.
Okay.
All right, what's next?
Non-stop talking.
So they just talk and talk to avoid getting caught.
It sounds simple, but it can be surprisingly effective.
Like they think they can talk their way out of anything.
Right. Liars often try to minimize those pauses and hesitations.
Like those ums and ahs.
Yeah, they think it makes them look less suspicious.
Nasher talks about this media training exercise.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Where they coached people to answer questions on stuff they knew nothing about.
They were basically trained to just start talking, even if they had no idea what they were going to say.
Wow.
It's like tricking your brain into believing its own nonsense.
But wouldn't the answers be, like, totally empty?
That's the thing. Even if they sound fluent, their answers might lack substance.
Oh, so it's like a politician giving a speech.
Exactly. All talk, no action.
Or in this case, all talk, no truth.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about manipulating how we perceive them.
It's like they're playing with our assumptions about how liars should act.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready for the next one. What's number 5?
Child's play.
This one makes me think of, like, hiding cookies and blaming the dog.
Uh-huh. Not exactly.
So what is it about?
So basically, expert liars use techniques that children use.
Wait, really?
Yeah, to make their lies harder to figure out.
Like what?
Well, little kids, when they first start lying, tend to keep things simple.
They don't have the brain power to make up complicated stories yet.
Exactly. They stick to short sentences,
So they're going for the less is more approach.
Yeah, because they know people tend to think simple equals honest.
But the truth isn't always simple, is it?
Right. It can be messy and complicated.
So if someone's being overly simplistic, it could actually be a red flag.
Exactly. And that's where you need to, like, dig deeper.
Ask more questions.
Yeah, and challenge those overly simple explanations.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, I'm ready for number 6. Hit me with it.
Masking. It's all about controlling facial expressions.
So like they're putting on a poker face?
Kinda. They're basically hiding their true emotions.
So they might be feeling guilty or scared.
But they'll mask those feelings with, like, anger or
To
something.
throw people off.
Exactly. It's a way of controlling the situation.
But how can you see through that if they're that good at hiding their emotions?
You have to look for micro-expressions.
Micro what?
Micro-expressions. They're these super quick, involuntary facial expressions.
Oh, like a flicker of fear or something?
Yeah, and they only last for a fraction of a second.
So you have to be really paying attention.
They're hard to spot, but
Yeah.
they can be really telling.
This is getting intense. All right, what's number 7?
It's called emotion redirection.
Okay, what's that all about?
So instead of hiding their guilt or anxiety, they acknowledge it.
They admit they're feeling those things.
Yeah, but they blame it on something else.
Ooh, sneaky.
Right. It's a way of deflecting suspicion.
Can you give me an example?
Like, imagine a cheating husband who expresses guilt,
Oh, okay.
but he says it's because he's been neglecting his grandma.
Oh, so he's redirecting the guilt to something else.
Exactly. It's a very calculated tactic.
It takes a lot of skill.
It does. If you see someone using this, you're dealing with a pro.
This is making me rethink all my past conversations. Okay, what's next?
Technique number 8 is embedded lies.
Embedded. What does that mean?
It's all about blending truth and fiction.
So it's not a complete lie
Right. They'll take a real experience and then tweak some key details.
to make it more believable.
Exactly. It's like embellishing a story, but with a deceptive purpose.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine someone's late and they say they were stuck in traffic because of an accident.
They were in traffic, so that part is true.
Yeah, but they might make up the accident to excuse their lateness.
So how can you catch them if they're using truth as a shield?
By asking very specific questions about the timeline.
Oh, like what time did the accident happen?
Exactly. The more specific you get, the more likely they are to trip up.
So it's like a mental game of chess, trying to outsmart them.
In a way, yes. You have to be really observant and pay attention to the details.
This is fascinating. Okay, what's number 9?
This one's called distorted truth.
That sounds like something a comedian would do.
It kind of is. They use humor and exaggeration to make their lies so absurd.
Like so over the top that no one would believe them.
Exactly. It's like they're playing with our perception of what's possible.
But wouldn't that kind of humor be suspicious?
It could be, but skilled liars know how to deliver it with charm.
They make it seem like a joke.
Yeah, like they're not being serious.
So how can you tell if someone's using this technique?
Look for inconsistencies in their behavior.
Like, does their body language match what they're saying?
Exactly. Are they genuinely amused by their own lie? Or is there some nervousness underneath?
So you have to look beyond the words.
Right. Silence can be a good tool here, too.
Like, just don't react?
Yeah, see how they respond to that.
It's like calling their bluff without actually saying anything.
Exactly.
Okay, on to technique number 10. What is it?
Body language. This is the one everyone thinks they know.
Yeah, fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, that stuff.
But Nasher says truly skilled liars actually do the opposite.
Wait, what?
They know those are the classic tells, so
Yeah.
they try to look extra calm.
So they're not fidgeting. They're being super still.
Exactly. They want to project confidence and credibility.
So we should be looking for unnatural stillness instead of nervous movements.
Right. Like if someone is being way too still, it could be a red flag.
Wow, this is like a whole new way of looking at body language.
Hey,
What about number 11?
it's called nice guy.
But aren't we supposed to trust people who are nice to us?
Ideally, yes.
So what's the catch?
Well, master manipulators use charm and likability as weapons.
Oh, so they're being nice to get something from you.
Exactly. They want to disarm you and make their lies easier to swallow.
That's so devious. But don't we usually feel like a little uneasy around liars? Even if we can't quite explain why.
You're right. Research shows we often have that gut feeling that something's off.
So we should trust those gut feelings.
Absolutely. If someone's being way too nice, especially if it seems out of character,
Yeah.
pay close attention. Look for inconsistencies.
Especially when they're under pressure.
Exactly. Does their niceness disappear when things get tough?
This is making me rethink all my friendships.
Haha. Well, not everyone is out to get you.
True.
But it's good to be aware of this technique.
All right, last one for this part was number 12.
It's called preparation is everything.
That sounds like good life advice in general.
It is, but for expert liars, it's essential.
So they're not just winging it,
No way. They rehearse their lies like they're preparing for a play.
like they're writing a script.
Exactly. They anticipate questions, come up with the backstories, even plant fake evidence.
Like that fake astronaut you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. He was so prepared, he fooled a lot of people.
So how can you catch someone who's that good?
You have to look for those unintentional details.
What are those?
They're the little things that make a story feel real.
Like those quirky little details you wouldn't think to make up.
Exactly. A rehearsed story might be missing those.
So even if the story sounds good, if it's too perfect, it might be fake.
It could be. Pay attention to those little inconsistencies.
Wow, this is a lot to take in. But it's super interesting.
I know, right?
I can't wait to dive into the rest of the book.
Me too. We've got a lot more to uncover.
All right, back for more Perfect Lie Secrets.
Yeah, we've only just scratched the surface.
12 techniques down and 1 to go. But before we get there, I want to loop back to preparation is everything.
Oh, yeah, that one's a biggie.
It's like they're not just lying. They're crafting a whole alternate reality.
Exactly. Think about that imposter astronaut again.
The guy who fooled all those experts.
Yeah. He had answers for everything, even props to back up his claim.
It's almost impressive in a kind of messed up way.
Right. But even with all that prep, they can't account for everything.
So there's still a way to catch him.
It's about looking for those unintentional details, Nasher calls it.
Unintentional details.
They're those quirks and little inconsistencies that make a story feel genuine.
Like what?
Well, imagine you're telling a story about a real event.
Okay.
You'll naturally include those little tangents and side comments.
Like, oh, and then my phone rang with the worst ringtone ever.
Exactly. A liar who's following a script might not think to include those things.
So their stories feel too polished, too perfect.
Right. They're missing those unscripted moments that make a story feel real.
So even if they've got their facts straight, the way they tell the story could betray them.
Exactly. You got to pay attention to those subtle cues, the stuff that's harder to fake.
Like body language and tone of voice.
Exactly. Those can reveal a lot, even if their words are carefully chosen.
So it's not just what they say, but how they say it.
Right. And it's not just one thing. It's about looking for patterns.
Okay, so it's about putting all those pieces together, like a puzzle.
Yeah, the more clues you gather, the clearer the picture becomes.
Makes sense. So what about that 13th technique? The one that's not really a technique.
This one's a big one. It's about understanding our own biases.
Our own biases.
We all have them, right? Whether we realize it or not.
So even if we know all these techniques, our own brains can still trip us up.
Exactly. We might be more likely to believe someone who's attractive or someone in a position of authority.
It's like judging a book by its cover.
Exactly. We got to be aware of those tendencies so we can be more objective.
So it's about self-awareness too, not just spotting deception in others.
Right. It's about understanding how our own minds work, so we're less likely to be manipulated.
This is getting pretty deep, but I like it.
It's fascinating stuff, right? Human behavior is so complex.
Speaking of complex, can we talk more about that baseline thing?
Sure, the baseline is like a person's normal, truthful behavior.
It's how they act when they're being genuine.
Exactly. And by observing when they deviate from that, you can start to see those red flags.
So the better you know someone, the easier it is to spot those deviations.
It makes sense,
Yeah.
right? If you know how your friend usually acts, you'll notice when they're being weird.
But what about people who are good at hiding their true feelings?
Even those people have moments of unguarded behavior, those little slips.
So even the best poker faces have cracks.
Exactly. And those cracks can be very revealing.
Okay, this is all super helpful, but I gotta admit, it's also kind of scary.
How so?
Makes you wonder how often you're being lied to without even knowing it.
That's a valid concern.
But it's not like everyone's out to deceive us, right?
Right. Most people are generally honest.
That's good to hear. But I'm still curious about those master liars, the ones who do it for a living.
What about them?
Like, what makes them tick? Why do they do it?
There are lots of reasons, right? Some lie for personal gain, some for power, some to protect themselves or others.
So it's not always malicious.
Not necessarily. It can be complicated.
So how do we use this knowledge in our everyday lives?
Well, it's not about becoming, like, paranoid or suspicious of everyone. It's about becoming more aware of those subtle cues, those patterns.
More mindful.
Exactly. And that can help you protect yourself from being manipulated.
I can see how that would be helpful in, like, job interviews or negotiations.
Oh, absolutely. In a job interview, you can look for signs of evasiveness or rehearsed answers.
So you're not just listening to their words.
Right. You're observing their whole demeanor.
And in negotiations, it's about being aware of the tactics they might use.
Yeah, so you can protect your own interests.
Basically, knowing their playbook gives you an advantage.
Exactly. It's about becoming a more savvy participant in those interactions.
Makes sense. But even with all this knowledge, can we really be sure we're not being fooled?
Lie detection isn't perfect. Even experts get it wrong sometimes.
So what's the point then?
The point is to be more aware, to sharpen your observation skills, to trust your gut feelings.
So it's not about being right all the time, but about being more alert.
Exactly. Even if you don't become a lie detecting superhero, just being aware of the possibility can help you make better decisions.
So before we wrap up this part, what are some key takeaways from The Perfect Lie?
Well, Nasher emphasizes that even the best liars make mistakes.
They slip up, they show their hand.
Exactly. And it's our job to be observant and spot those inconsistencies.
There's little cracks in their facade.
Right. It's about understanding how deception works, recognizing those patterns.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a lot to process, but it's really helpful.
I know, right?
Well, I'm ready to dive into the last part and see what else we can learn.
Me too. Let's do it.
Okay, we've gone deep into the liar's toolkit with The Perfect Lie.
Yeah. Some serious mind games in there.
What's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think the biggest thing is we
Okay.
often underestimate just how good we are at lying.
Oh, interesting.
And because of that, we're really bad at spotting it in others.
So we're good liars, but terrible lie detectors.
Pretty much. Which is why,
Yeah.
understanding these techniques, these patterns is so important.
Because we can't rely on those, like, old school tells anymore.
Right. The fidgeting, the avoiding eye contact. Liars have upped their
They've
game.
been playing checkers while they're playing 4D chess.
Exactly. But now, thanks to Nasher, we're getting a little closer to their level, right?
Yeah, it's like he's giving us the cheat codes.
This knowledge makes us less vulnerable.
Right.
It helps us see those little inconsistencies, those patterns that give them away.
So it's not about becoming, like, suspicious of everyone,
No, not at all.
but more about developing a sharper eye.
Yeah, a more critical way of looking at things.
So we're not trying to become like human polygraph machines,
Not unless you want to.
but we're trying to protect ourselves from being manipulated.
Right.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
It's about understanding that everyone has vulnerabilities,
Uh-huh.
and that includes ourselves.
Exactly.
So even with all this knowledge, we're not going to be right every time.
No, lie detection isn't a perfect science.
It's more of an art, I guess,
You could say that. But it's a skill you can develop, you know?
with practice.
Exactly. The more you learn about it, the more you'll start to pick up on those patterns, almost instinctively.
Okay, so what's your final challenge for our listeners?
Well,
How can they put all this into practice?
I'd say pay closer attention in your everyday interactions.
Like really pay attention?
Yeah. Watch people, listen to what they're saying, but also how they're saying it.
Look for those inconsistencies, those moments where things don't quite add up.
Exactly. You might be surprised at what you notice.
We're all amateur detectives now.
Right. It's about becoming more aware of the subtle signals people send.
I love it. Well, this has been an incredible journey into the world of the perfect lie.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I feel like I've learned so much about not only spotting liars, but also how easily we can be deceived.
It's definitely eye-opening.
For everyone listening out there, knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Now you have the tools to navigate the world of deception with a little more confidence, a little more awareness.
They'll go out there and be more perceptive.
Stay curious. And until next time, happy lie spotting. See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.